So this is going to sound absolutely insane, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe sharing this will help me make sense of what the hell happened, because right now, I'm a mess. And if anything like this happens to anyone else, maybe they'll know they're not alone. I'm not the kind of person who messes around with the dark web. Like, I'm not some hacker. I don't sit around in hoodies with black screens and green code. I'm just a regular dude who sometimes gets bored and ends up going down weird internet rabbit holes. You know how it is. You start watching a couple of creepy YouTube videos late at night, and before you know it, you're reading forums about government conspiracies and urban legends that people swear are real. It's all fun and games until it gets too real. Anyway, one night I was just chilling at home, messing around online. It was like 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep. I'd gone down this deep hole on YouTube about all these messed up hidden corners of the internet. I've heard about the dark web before, but I never actually thought about checking it out. But like I said, I was bored. I started looking into it. You know, how to access it and what kind of stuff is supposedly on there. I knew most of it was just urban legend, but curiosity got the better of me, so I followed a couple of guides, installed Tor, VPN, all that stuff, and boom, there I was, on the dark web. Now at first it's kinda underwhelming. Lots of shady-looking forums, black market stuff, creepy chat rooms, but I kept clicking around, kinda numb to it all, honestly. It wasn't nearly as forbidden as people made it out to be, but that's when I found this one site. There was no name. It was just a black screen with a single link in the middle. Live broadcasts. Watch now. I know. Red flag right there, but again, I was just so curious, so I clicked. So, a page loaded up with a bunch of thumbnails, live feeds supposedly. Some were static, some had this weird motion blur, and others showed clear rooms, but no people. Just empty spaces. There was one thumbnail, though, that caught my eye immediately. It was my room, like my exact bedroom. I just stared at it, frozen. It wasn't like, oh, this looks kinda like my room. It was my room down to every single detail. The same bedspread, the same messy pile of clothes in the corner, the crooked poster on the wall. I thought maybe this is some kind of prank, like maybe a live stream of my room that got hacked into somehow. So, I clicked it. And that's when I felt my blood run cold. There I was, on the screen, sitting at my desk, wearing the exact clothes I had on at that moment. I was just sitting there, staring at the computer screen, just like I was doing in real life. It was me, right now. I pushed back from my desk, heart racing, and the person on the screen did the exact same thing. Every move I made, he made, like looking into a mirror, but live. I thought maybe there was some kind of webcam hack going on. That would be terrifying enough, right? But then something happened that made my stomach turn. He stood up. But I didn't. I stayed frozen in my chair while he stood up and started walking around my room, looking directly at the camera, smirking. The way he moved, it wasn't right. It was me, but the way he moved was so off. His limbs were too loose, almost like they weren't connected properly. He turned toward the camera, still smirking, and raised a finger to his lips, like he was telling me to keep quiet. I swear to God, I couldn't move. It felt like I was glued to my chair, watching this thing pretend to be me. I tried to snap myself out of it. I mean, this had to be some messed up deepfake, right? Maybe it was pre-recorded and they'd just synced it up with my webcam somehow. But it didn't explain how he was moving independently of me now, or how he knew I was watching. Then he did something that made my heart feel like it was about to explode out of my chest. He turned and started walking toward my bedroom door. The door in my room, the one just to my left. On the screen, he reached for the handle, and in real life, I heard the click of the door opening. Slowly, the door creaked open just a few inches, enough for me to see the dark hallway outside. I shot out of my chair, slammed the door shut, and locked it, my hands shaking like crazy. But when I looked back at the screen, he was standing right there again, in the middle of my room, grinning. It was like he was mocking me, like he knew how scared I was. The camera zoomed in on his face, and I swear the expression he had, it wasn't human. The grin stretched too wide, and his eyes were just these dark, empty pits, like looking into nothing. I pulled the plug on my computer. I don't know why I didn't just close the browser or turn off the monitor like a normal person, but I panicked. The screen went black, and for a second I felt this weird sense of relief. Like, okay, maybe it was over. But then I heard footsteps. Real, actual footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Coming from the hallway. My heart was pounding so loud in my ears that I thought I was going to pass out. I just stood there, staring at the door, my mind racing. I'm not a superstitious guy. I don't believe in ghosts or any of that stuff, but this was different. This wasn't some weird glitch or tech prank. I could feel that something was on the other side of that door. Something that wasn't me, but had been watching me for God knows how long. The footsteps stopped, right outside the door, and then a knock. Just once. Slow and deliberate. Knock. I froze, not knowing if I should answer or just keep pretending this wasn't happening. But then the voice came, and this is where I completely lost it. "Let me in," it said. It was my voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what the hell was happening. Maybe it was sleep deprivation. Maybe I was just imagining it, or having some kind of messed up hallucination. I mean, it was late. It was 2 a.m. Your brain does weird stuff when you're sleep deprived, right? But this wasn't a dream. It wasn't a glitch or some prank. This was real, and I felt that sinking feeling in my stomach, that primal fear, the one that tells you something's not right. "Let me in," the voice repeated, louder this time. It was my voice, but distorted, like it was coming through a cheap speaker or someone trying to imitate me. The tone wasn't right. There was this weird pitch to it, like someone was stretching the sound in a way that wasn't natural. I backed away from the door, trying to make sense of it. My brain kept telling me to just ignore it, that it wasn't real. But I couldn't help myself. I grabbed my phone and turned on the camera, pointing it at the door, thinking maybe I could catch whatever was outside. It sounds stupid now, but I wanted some kind of proof, something that would explain all this. But when I looked at the screen, the door was closed, like completely shut. The camera didn't show the same crack I could see with my own eyes. I looked up from my phone, and sure enough, the door was still slightly open, just like it had been before. But through the phone, nothing. Like the door hadn't opened at all. That's when the knocking started again, but this time it was faster. Knock, knock, knock. 3 quick taps. My phone slipped out of my hand, clattering to the floor, and the second it hit the ground, the knocking stopped. Like it knew I was panicking and was playing with me. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood there like an idiot, staring at the door, waiting for whatever was on the other side to make a move. I was holding my breath without realizing it, just listening for any kind of sound. I strained my ears, but everything was dead silent. And then it spoke again. But this time, it wasn't a demand. It was worse. "I'm already in." My heart nearly stopped. The voice didn't come from outside the door this time. It came from behind me. I whipped around, expecting to see, I don't even know, something standing there. But there was nothing. Just my empty room. The same messy bed, the same clothes scattered around the floor, my chair at the desk, just like before. But something was different. I could feel it. You know that sensation when someone's watching you? The hair on the back of your neck stands up, and you get this horrible sinking feeling that you're not alone. That's what I felt. Like the air was heavier, thicker. I don't know how long I stood there, trying to make sense of what was happening, but then my phone buzzed. I almost jumped out of my skin when I heard it. I picked it up off the floor, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it again. There was a notification. Someone had sent me a message. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, just a string of random digits. It didn't look like a normal phone number. I opened the message and it was a picture, a live picture, of me. Standing in my room, phone in hand, staring at the screen. Exactly like I was right then. It was taken from the same angle, the same lighting.
It was now. I looked around the room again, trying to figure out where the hell the camera was. I checked the corners under the bed, behind the door. Nothing. But the picture was real, and it was me. I was losing it. I felt my mind slipping. I wanted to scream, or maybe just run. But where the hell would I go? Who could I tell about this? No one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. Then, the next message came. This one was worse. "You shouldn't have looked."
That's all it said. 5 words that made my stomach drop. What the hell was I supposed to do? I thought about leaving, just bolting out the front door and getting the hell out of there. But the thing is, I felt like I was trapped. Like somehow, leaving the room would be worse. Like whatever was doing this wanted me to leave, like it was waiting for me to make a move so it could do something even worse. And I wasn't about to give it the satisfaction. I didn't respond to the messages. I just sat there, my brain in overdrive, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Then, the sound came. A low, wet scraping sound, like something being dragged across the floor. It was coming from under my bed. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But I couldn't stop myself. I crouched down, peering into the dark space under the bed, praying to God I wouldn't see anything. And at first, I didn't. Just the usual mess of dust, a few old boxes I hadn't touched in years. I almost laughed at myself for being so paranoid. But then I saw it. At the very back, just barely peeking out from behind one of the boxes, there was something that looked like fingers. Pale, thin fingers, slowly curling and uncurling, like they were trying to get a better grip. I jumped back, my breath catching in my throat. I swear I could hear it moving now, something shifting under the bed, the scraping sound getting louder, closer. I backed up toward the door, ready to bolt. I reached for the handle, but just as I touched it, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed. I don't even remember doing it, but I know I screamed loud enough for my throat to burn. I kicked back, trying to shake off whatever was holding me. It felt like a hand, cold and bony, its grip tightening around my leg like a vice. I kicked harder, pulling with everything I had until finally the grip loosened and I fell backward, slamming into the door. I didn't look under the bed again. I didn't need to. I knew whatever had grabbed me was still there, waiting. But the room felt different now, like I wasn't alone. Like the space itself had changed, warped into something darker, something alive. I had to get out. I had to do something. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't a picture. It was a video. A live feed, just like before. But this time, the camera was pointed directly at my bed. The same bed where I had just seen those fingers. And in the video, something was crawling out. Something that looked just like me. The thing on the screen smiled at the camera. And then, it waved. I threw the phone across the room and made a break for it. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't grab anything. I just bolted out of my room and down the hallway, heart pounding so hard it felt like my chest was going to explode. My legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline was keeping me going. I didn't know where I was running to. I just knew I had to get the hell out of there. I hit the stairs and almost tripped, catching myself on the railing at the last second. My whole body was shaking. Every shadow, every creak in the floorboards felt like it was closing in on me. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't done with me. I could feel it, like it was following me, just out of sight. I didn't dare look back. I reached the front door and fumbled with the lock, my hands slick with sweat. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that thing creeping down the stairs after me. Finally, the door gave, and I threw it open, stumbling out into the cold night air. I sprinted down the driveway, barefoot, not caring where I was going, just that I needed to get far away from that house. As I reached the street, my phone buzzed in my pocket again. I didn't even want to look, but I couldn't help myself. My hands were shaking so bad that I almost dropped it. When I unlocked the screen, there was another message from that same number. No text this time, just another video.
I hesitated. I didn't want to open it, but some part of me needed to know what was in it. Against my better judgment, I tapped on the video. It was the same live feed of my bedroom. But this time, the camera wasn't focused on the bed. It was on the doorway. The same doorway I'd just run through. And standing there in the frame was me. Or something that looked exactly like me. He was standing there, staring at the camera with this blank expression, his head tilted just a little too far to the side, like his neck was broken. And then he grinned. The same twisted grin I'd seen on the screen earlier, like he was enjoying this. My blood turned to ice. And then in the video, he stepped forward, toward the camera, toward me. I spun around, expecting to see him standing right there, just a few feet away. But the street was empty, dark, silent. Just rows of houses with their lights off. Everyone else peacefully asleep while I was living a goddamn nightmare. I was losing my mind. This couldn't be real. It couldn't. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself this was just some elaborate prank or hallucination, I knew deep down it wasn't. This thing, whatever it was real. It was playing with me, like a predator toying with its prey, and I had no idea what to do. I kept running. I don't know how long I ran, just that my lungs were burning, and I could barely catch my breath. The streets were deserted, and everything felt so off. Too quiet. Too still. Like the world had emptied out, and I was the last person left alive. I eventually ducked into a nearby park, trying to catch my breath. I collapsed onto a bench, my whole body trembling. I sat there for a minute, staring at my phone, half expecting it to buzz again. But it didn't. No more messages, no more videos, just silence. Maybe I'd outrun it. Maybe whatever was happening was tied to the house somehow, and getting away had broken the connection. But as soon as I started to let my guard down, I noticed something that made my skin crawl.
There was someone sitting on the bench across from me. I hadn't noticed them at first because they were sitting so still, almost unnaturally still, just staring at me. I squinted, trying to make out their face in the dim light. And then I realized it was me. I mean, it was exactly me. Same clothes, same hair, even the same look of exhausted terror on his face. But there was something wrong with his eyes. They were too wide, too black, like he was staring into my soul. I couldn't breathe. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I wanted to get up and run again, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like they were glued to the ground. I just sat there, locked in a staring contest with this twisted version of myself, praying he wouldn't move, that he wouldn't get up and come closer. But he did. Slowly. He stood up, his movements jerky and unnatural, like he wasn't used to his body. He took a step forward, then another, each one deliberate and slow, like he was savoring every second of this. I finally managed to stand up, my legs shaking beneath me. I backed away, but my eyes never left him. He didn't stop. I kept backing up until I hit something hard behind me. A tree. My breath caught in my throat. I was trapped. No way to run. He was only a few feet away now, and I could see the grin on his face. That same, wide, twisted grin that looked like it didn't belong on a human face. I don't know what I was expecting him to do. Attack me. Try to kill me. But he didn't. He just stood there staring at me, his grin slowly widening until it looked like his mouth was going to split open. And then he whispered in my voice, "You're next." I snapped. I shoved past him and sprinted out of the park, not even caring where I was going. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. I felt like a complete idiot, running from something that looked like me, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to get as far away as possible. I stopped in front of a 24-hour convenience store, panting, trying to catch my breath. It was empty, the fluorescent lights flickering above. I needed people. I needed to be around normal people. I walked in, the bell above the door chiming softly, and made my way to the counter. The guy behind the register didn't even look up from his phone as I approached. "Hey man," I stammered, my voice cracking.
I need help. He looked up at me, his face completely indifferent, like he'd seen a million people like me before. Yeah? What's up? I opened my mouth to explain, but then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the security monitor behind him, I saw myself, walking into the store. But the footage wasn't from a few seconds ago. It was now. And the version of me on the screen wasn't walking up to the counter. He was standing by the door, watching, grinning. I stumbled back, knocking over a rack of candy, as the guy behind the counter stared at me like I was insane. "You all right, dude?" he asked, sounding more annoyed than concerned. I turned to look at the door, half expecting to see myself standing there. But there was nothing. The door was empty, just me and the cashier. But when I looked back at the security screen, the other me was still there, still watching. I didn't even bother explaining. I ran out of the store and into the street, not knowing where I was going, just knowing I had to get the hell out of there. I didn't stop running until I couldn't breathe anymore. I ran until I couldn't feel my legs anymore. My lungs were burning, and every step felt like I was dragging cement blocks. The streets were empty, silent, except for the sound of my footsteps pounding against the pavement. No cars, no people, just that eerie stillness that made everything feel like a bad dream. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced that at any second, that thing, whatever it was going to be right behind me, with that twisted grin plastered on its face.
I didn't stop until I reached an old diner. It was one of those 24-hour places that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Peeling vinyl booths, flickering neon signs, and the kind of stale, greasy smell that clings to the walls. But it was open, and that was all that mattered. There were people inside, real people. I needed that right now. I needed to be around normal, living people who weren't me. I shoved the door open, the little bell above it ringing as I stumbled inside. The waitress behind the counter glanced up from her magazine, barely giving me a second look. She was old, like in her 60s maybe, with deep-set wrinkles and tired eyes. There were a couple of other people scattered around the diner, an older guy nursing a cup of coffee, a couple sitting at the back booth, heads down, too engrossed in their phones to notice anything. It was normal, boring, perfect. I dropped into a booth near the window, my hands shaking as I grabbed the menu. I wasn't even hungry. I just needed to act like everything was fine, like I wasn't losing my mind. I needed to be in the real world, not whatever the hell that thing was pulling me into. The waitress shuffled over, pen and pad in hand, giving me a look like she'd seen this 1,000 times before. Some dude stumbling in off the street, looking like he's seen a ghost. Little did she know, she wasn't far off. "What can I get you, hun?" she asked, her voice raspy, like she'd smoked a pack a day for the last 40 years. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, and I realized I was still shaking. I wiped my palms on my jeans, trying to calm down, trying to pretend like I wasn't absolutely losing it. Coffee, I finally managed. Just coffee. She gave me this long, tired look, like she knew something was off but didn't care enough to ask. She just scribbled on her pad and walked back behind the counter. I watched her go, my eyes darting to the door every few seconds. My mind was racing, thinking about that thing, the other me, standing there grinning at me from the security camera in the store. How was this even possible? Was it following me? Could it be here, right now, watching me from somewhere in the diner? I forced myself to look around. The old guy with the coffee hadn't moved, still staring into his cup like it held all the answers. The couple in the back were arguing about something, but it was muffled, like they were talking through water. Everyone was so normal, so detached from the absolute terror that had taken over my life. I pulled out my phone, half expecting it to buzz with another message or video, but the screen stayed blank. No notifications, no creepy live feeds. It was just silent. For a second, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I had outrun whatever it was. Maybe it was tied to my house or that park or wherever the hell it had come from, and now that I was somewhere else, I was safe. But that thought didn't last long. The waitress brought my coffee, slamming the mug down on the table with a loud clink. The liquid sloshed over the side, but she didn't even notice. "Anything else?" she asked, not really waiting for an answer before turning to walk away. I reached for the mug, my hands still trembling. The heat from the coffee felt good, grounding almost. I took a sip, trying to steady my nerves, but as soon as the liquid hit my tongue, I gagged. It tasted wrong, like burnt metal, mixed with something else, something rotten. I spit it back into the cup, wiping my mouth with my sleeve, and pushed the mug away. My stomach churned, and I thought for a second I might actually throw up. I didn't even want to look at the coffee, but my eyes drifted to the cup anyway. That's when I saw it. At first I thought I was imagining it, but no, it was real. The liquid in the mug started moving, slowly at first, like a ripple, and then it started swirling like something was stirring it from the inside. I blinked, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, but then I saw my reflection in the coffee, and it wasn't me. The face staring back at me was mine, but it was twisted, warped, with that same awful, unnatural grin. The same empty eyes that looked like they were staring straight through me into something deeper. The reflection winked. I pushed the mug away, the ceramic screeching against the table. My heart was pounding again, that familiar feeling of dread crawling up my spine. I looked around the diner, trying to stay calm, trying not to draw attention to myself, but everyone was still just going about their business, like nothing was happening, like I wasn't watching my reflection smile back at me from a cup of coffee. I stood up, the legs of the booth scraping against the floor as I bolted for the door. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed through, stepping out into the cold night air. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I leaned against the side of the building, trying to pull myself together. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay anywhere. This thing, whatever it wasn't going to stop. It wasn't tied to a place. It was tied to me. I glanced at my phone again, the screen still blank, and for a second I thought about calling someone. But who the hell would believe this? My friends? The cops? No one would take me seriously. They'd think I was having a breakdown, or that I was on something. Hell, maybe I was losing it. Maybe this was all in my head, some kind of mental break. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was too real. The cold, the fear, it was too real.
I started walking again, not really knowing where I was going, just putting distance between me and the diner, between me and that thing. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. Every sound made me jump. I was a wreck, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that twisted version of myself lurking around every corner. But nothing came. The streets were empty, just me and the dark. After what felt like hours, I ended up back at my apartment. I know it sounds insane, but I didn't know where else to go. I didn't have anywhere else. I couldn't just wander the streets forever. Maybe if I stayed inside, locked all the doors, turned off all the lights, it would leave me alone. Maybe I could just wait it out. I hesitated at the front door, my hand hovering over the knob. What if it was waiting inside? What if that thing was already in there? But I couldn't stay outside, not like this. So I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, just like I had left it. No sign of anything out of place. I locked the door behind me and stood there for a minute, listening. Nothing. Just the usual hum of the refrigerator, the quiet creaks of the building settling. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe it was over. Maybe I was safe now. But as I walked toward my bedroom, I froze. The door was open. Just a crack. I hadn't left it like that. I took a step closer, my whole body tensing. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I pushed the door open, just enough to see inside. And there, sitting at my desk, staring at the computer screen, was me. Again. But this time, he wasn't grinning. He wasn't moving. He was just sitting there, still. Too still. The light from the monitor flickered across his face, casting long dark shadows that made his features look hollow. Empty. And then, slowly, like he was waiting for me to notice, he turned to face me.
His eyes were blank, like two black pits, no expression. just that awful, eerie stillness. And then, with a voice that sounded like mine but was somehow off, he said, "It's your turn now." I stepped back, my blood turning cold. The lights flickered, my vision blurred, and then everything went black. I woke up on the floor. At first, I had no idea where I was. The room was spinning, and my head felt like it had been cracked open with a sledgehammer. Slowly, the room came into focus. I was in my bedroom, lying on the cold, hard floor, staring up at the ceiling. Everything felt wrong, off, somehow, like I was in a dream, or maybe still half-conscious. My body felt heavy, like it wasn't even mine anymore. But this wasn't a dream. It was too real, too raw. I pushed myself up, groaning as the room tilted around me. My limbs felt stiff, like I hadn't moved in hours. I looked around, blinking away the fog in my brain, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing I remembered was him, me, sitting at my desk, telling me it was my turn. And now it was quiet. Too quiet. The apartment felt suffocating, like the walls were pressing in on me. I could feel it. Something wasn't right. There was this thick, oppressive atmosphere hanging in the air, like the whole world had been drained of life. I glanced at the desk, where that other version of me had been sitting, but it was empty now. The chair was pushed back slightly, like someone had just been there, but there was no sign of him, no sign of me. I pulled myself to my feet, my legs trembling. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, searching for some kind of answer, some way to make sense of everything, but nothing made sense. How could it? How do you rationalize seeing yourself? Seeing something wearing your face, mimicking your every move, taunting you? I grabbed my phone, half expecting another message, another video, but there was nothing. No notifications, no missed calls. Just a black, empty screen. I checked the time. It was 3:33 a.m. That's when I noticed something strange, the battery icon. It was at 1%. I had charged it before all of this started. It should have been full, but now it was nearly dead. I stared at the screen, confused, when suddenly the phone buzzed in my hand. A single notification flashed across the screen before the battery died completely. Live broadcast. Watch now. I dropped the phone. No. I wasn't doing this again. I wasn't going to watch. I wasn't going to see whatever twisted, horrific thing it wanted me to see this time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't matter, that it didn't need the phone anymore, that whatever was happening wasn't limited to some dark web stream. It was happening here, in my world, in my life. I stumbled out of the bedroom, my heart racing. I needed to get out. I needed to leave the apartment, get far away from this nightmare. Maybe if I ran far enough, this thing wouldn't be able to follow. Maybe I could outrun it, just like before. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard it. A voice. From the bedroom, my voice. You can't leave. I froze, my hand hovering just inches from the doorknob. The air felt thick, heavy. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what was behind me, but I knew I had no choice. Slowly, I turned. There, standing in the doorway of my bedroom, was me, again. But this time, something was different. His face wasn't twisted into that horrible grin anymore. He wasn't smirking or mocking me. Instead, he just stood there, expressionless, his head tilted slightly to the side, watching me with those same dark, empty eyes. He took a step forward. I took a step back, my back hitting the door behind me. You can't run, he said, his voice flat, emotionless. It's already too late. I shook my head, my throat tightening. What do you want from me? I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, like he was considering the question. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again.
You're going to take my place, he said, just like I took yours. I didn't understand. None of this made sense. What the hell are you talking about? I demanded, my voice shaking. "Who are you?" That grin, that awful twisted grin slowly crept back across his face. "I'm you," he said, "and you're me." He took another step forward. I could see him more clearly now, and that's when I noticed something. His skin, it wasn't right. It was pale, too pale, like it had been stretched too tight over his bones. His eyes were black, empty, like staring into a void. But the worst part, his movements. They were slow, deliberate, but there was something wrong about them, like his body wasn't his own, like he was trying to figure out how to control it. I pressed my back harder against the door, my hands fumbling for the lock. But before I could open it, he lunged. He was fast, unnaturally fast. His hand slammed into the door beside my head, pinning me there, his face just inches from mine. I could smell this awful, sour stench coming off him like something rotting. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might burst out of my chest. "You can't run," he whispered, his breath cold against my skin. "This is how it ends." I struggled, trying to push him away, but his grip was like iron. His other hand wrapped around my throat, squeezing just enough to make my vision blur. I gasped, clawing at his hand, but it was useless. He was too strong. "You were never supposed to look," he said, his voice almost soft. "You were never supposed to see." Tears blurred my vision as I choked, my chest tightening with panic. This was it. I was going to die. But then, just as my vision started to go black, he let go. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my throat burning. I looked up at him, expecting him to finish me off, but he just stood there, watching me, his expression blank. "You'll understand soon," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And then slowly, he started to change. His skin began to warp, twisting and contorting like it was melting off his bones. His face shifted, his features morphing into something grotesque, something barely recognizable as human. His eyes, once dark and empty, were now wide, bloodshot, and filled with a kind of hunger I can't describe. I scrambled back, pressing myself against the door, unable to tear my eyes away from him. His body kept twisting, bones cracking, skin stretching, until what was standing in front of me was no longer a copy of me. It was something else, something inhuman. And then, just like that, he was gone. I blinked. The room was empty, silent. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking, too afraid to move. Minutes? Hours? It didn't matter. I couldn't process what had just happened. I couldn't believe it. But I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. I had to get out. I had to leave now, before it came back. But as I reached for the door, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror, and my heart stopped. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. It was his. I'm him now, and he's out there, in my body, living my life. And no one will ever know.